How you give a consequence makes a difference in the degree to which a student takes responsibility for their actions, reflects on their misbehavior, and resolves not to make the same mistake again. In other words, how you give a consequence makes a big difference in improving behavior and whether or not your students are improving their behavior. What happens is that teachers tend to make 3 mistakes that interfere with this process. And so in today's video, we're going to go over these 3 big mistakes when enforcing consequences. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to answer the question, well, how should you give a consequence then? Before we get there, please do me a favor and subscribe to this channel. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Leave a comment below. I would really appreciate it. So the first mistake that teachers make that when giving consequences that interfere with accountability is showing displeasure. So any sort of displeasure that you outwardly show when you're giving a consequence, whether it's anger or frustration, maybe you're sighing or glaring at the student or harumphing or whatever it is, any sort of displeasure has the effect of placing some of the responsibility for that misbehavior off of their shoulders and onto yours, because you're behaving in a way that shows that their behavior affects you. It gets under your skin. But you're not the one who misbehaved. They are. And they need to take the full burden of the misbehavior. And so again, the more that you show displeasure, the more you show that it bothers you and gets on your nerves, the less that student is going to accept accountability and reflect on that misbehavior. Now, this is something that some teachers say, well, I don't have a choice. I just get frustrated. And I get that for sure, but there are strategies that you can use if this is you, if it does get under your skin when a student misbehaves. There are ways, strategies you can use that can fix that. And we're going to go over that in a future video. So some really simple things that you can do to ensure that when a student misbehaves, it doesn't affect you in the least. You're just like, I just need to enforce a consequence. But just know, fake it until you make it. Don't show any displeasure when you're giving a consequence. The next mistake is waiting for a response. And I see this, most classrooms that I visit, a teacher will give a consequence, so they'll do the right thing, they'll follow through and give a consequence, but they'll pause and they'll look at the student and wait for the student to react somehow. And oftentimes what this does is it invites an argument, because the student looks and sees you waiting and they feel like they have to account for their misbehavior. They have to answer to it. And a lot of times that's what teachers are doing. They're like, well, what do you have to say for yourself? And so they wait for a response. And what this does, again, it causes that student to argue. So it gives them a chance to deny the misbehavior, to justify for their misbehavior, to place the blame at someone else, to make excuses for themselves, or to argue with the teacher. You don't want any of that. Your classroom management plan, because you taught it so thoroughly, and the line of the boundary line of each rule is so clear that once it's broken, there's no need to discuss anything. You just follow through. But when you get in a situation where you're arguing, you're creating resentment with that student, which lessens your overall influence. It also weakens any sort of accountability because, again, they're fighting against it. They're justifying for it. And so in their mind, they're not reflecting on their misbehavior. They're not taking ownership of it. They're blaming you or blaming someone else, and they're angry. Naturally, they're going to be simmering in anger at you for holding them accountable. And then again, that behavior isn't going to improve in that situation. It may even get worse because you're creating friction between you and that student. As you know, if you're a longtime follower of smart classroom management, you know this is a no-no. This is a big problem. You want a positive relationship with your students for many, many reasons. One of the most important of which is that students will take responsibility for their misbehavior. The last very common thing that teachers do when enforcing consequences is adding to the misbehavior. So the student will misbehave, the teacher will enforce a consequence, and then the teacher will give their 2 cents. So the teacher will tell the student, here's what you should think about this misbehavior. They'll give a little lecture, a 2-second lecture. They'll tell the student what to think or how they should feel about their misbehavior. But again, what this does is that it makes the student angry at you. And if you do the thinking for them, they're not going to be doing it on their own. And for behavior to improve, to have real change in behavior, you have to create conditions where the student will naturally accept responsibility and they'll naturally be thinking to themselves, I want to be a part of the classroom in good standing. I want to be a member of a classroom that is special, that is bigger than the students, bigger than any one individual student. A place that I enjoy being part of. This is what causes a change in behavior when the student decides of their own accord that they want to improve. And if you're giving your 2 cents as you're escorting them to timeout, and by the way, you should never escort students to timeout. They do it on their own, completely on their own. So this brings up the question, well then what's the most effective way to give a consequence? Some of it depends on the grade level. Some of it depends on the time of year. And also some of it depends on the misbehavior itself. But in general, all you're doing is informing. You're just informing. You're giving facts. We recommend just saying simply, you have a warning because you broke rule number 3. This is the standard thing that you say to a student, especially in the beginning of the school year. Now, if let's say it's the first week, you may say you have a warning because you broke rule number 2 and didn't raise your hand before speaking. So you want to be clear. You want to make sure it's clear, and then you turn and walk away. Sometimes you do have to approach just so they see you, and it makes it easier to give them a consequence. But oftentimes the student knows they misbehaved, and sometimes you won't even move and you'll just say, you have a warning, like that. And then the older they are, the less demonstrative you have to be. Also, if they're part of a group or something, then of course you have to approach. But again, the idea is to inform and then turn and walk away without showing displeasure, without waiting, without adding your 2 cents. This is the key, just to avoid these things and to inform the student. At the high school level, there are some some choices, a couple different ways that you can do it that can maybe add a little bit more accountability, like making eye contact with the student can be, if you define it as such, that can be your warning or a notice of a consequence. Older students can really appreciate this. Someone asked me if I considered that glaring at a student. Not at all. You're just making eye contact so they know that they misbehaved and they'll get a consequence. This is something, again, that's taught at the beginning of the year, so it's clear. That's the idea, though, informing with clarity. Okay, hope this helps. I know that if you do this like this, you just give a consequence and turn and walk away, you'll notice an improved behavior, especially if you're doing one of these. Okay, I hope you're having a great week. I hope this helps. I'll see you next time.